Top 1. The Vitrified Forts of Scotland. Run your hand along the wall. Go ahead. You expect rough stone, cold and gray, the kind of surface that scrapes your palm, but it doesn't. The surface is smooth, glassy, and bubbled in places, like the skin of something that was once liquid and then decided to stop. You are standing inside an Iron Age hill fort on a Scottish hilltop 700 years before Christ, and the wall you are touching has been melted. Not chipped, not crumbled, but melted and fused into a single mass of black glittering stone that looks like it was poured rather than built. And the nearest volcano is more than 100 kilometers away. This is not one site. It is not a local curiosity. Across Scotland, from Aberdeen down to Argyll, more than 60 hill forts share this same impossible feature. The antiquarian John Williams first catalogued them in 1987 and gave them the name that stuck: vitrified forts. The stone walls had been subjected to temperatures of at least 1,150 degrees, hot enough to melt the granite and local rock into a fused glassy mass. Williams had no explanation. 250 years later, we still don't have a satisfying one. The scale of the problem becomes clear the moment you look at the numbers. Tap O'Noth in Aberdeen, one of the most studied examples, has a vitrified wall running for roughly 800 millimeters circumference, with fused sections up to 3 millimeters thick. To vitrify stone, you need sustained heat between 1,050 and 1,200 degrees. An ordinary wood fire, even a large one, peaks at around 600 to 700 degrees. It is not a matter of burning more wood. The chemistry doesn't work. You can stack timber to the sky and still not get there. Archaeologist Ian Ralston of the University of Edinburgh has spent decades on this problem. In experimental work carried out in the 1980s, his team attempted to replicate the vitrification using a timber-laced stone wall, the construction technique most commonly proposed as the fuel source. They burned it. They pushed the fire as hard as they could. The wall achieved temperatures of around 700 to 800 degrees at best. The stone did not vitrify, not even close. The experiment is the most important piece of evidence on the entire subject, and it is consistently underreported because what it proves is that the standard explanation simply doesn't work. There is another detail that makes the conventional story harder to hold. The vitrification is not surface-level discoloration. It penetrates 30 to 50 centimeters into the wall cores. That requires not just high temperature, but sustained exposure, time measured in hours at furnace-level heat. And inside the vitrified zones, there is no charcoal, no ash, and no organic debris embedded in the fused mass. Whatever produced this heat did it so intensely and so rapidly that organic material was not charred. It was vaporized. The 60-plus sites are distributed across Scotland with no concentration around historically documented warfare corridors or volcanic geology. They just appear scattered across the highlands like burn marks left by something that was moving. Archaeologists have offered two main explanations. The first is enemy destruction. Attackers burned the timber lacing inside the walls, and the resulting fire melted the stone. The second is intentional construction. The builders themselves vitrified the walls to strengthen them using a controlled burning process we no longer understand. Neither explanation survives close contact with the experimental data, and neither explanation accounts for the most quietly unsettling detail of all. Some researchers studying the forts have noted a consistent directional orientation to the vitrification at multiple sites, as if the heat came from a specific point above the horizon rather than rising from the ground. Could these walls be the scorch marks of something atmospheric? Some researchers, including thermal physicist Dr. Antonio Zamora, have raised the possibility of focused plasma discharge or a cometary airburst event, the kind of phenomenon that leveled 2,000 square kilometers of Siberian forest at Tunguska in 1908, but smaller, more targeted, and repeated across a single region of a single island over centuries. That question has no settled answer. What does have an answer is the simpler one. The stone was melted. No one knows how, and whatever did it 60 times. Top 2. Mohenjo-Daro. From the cold highlands of Scotland, we travel south and east across 12,000 kilometers of ocean to the most sophisticated urban civilization the ancient world had ever produced. and to a neighborhood at its center that looks like it was erased in a single second. Mohenjo-Daro. The city is a marvel. You have to understand that before you understand what happened to it. In 2000 BC, while most of Europe was still scattered in farming villages, Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley was home to an estimated 35,000 to 50,000 people. It had grid-planned streets, a covered sewage system more advanced than anything Rome would build for another 2,000 years, and a standardized brick size used consistently across hundreds of kilometers of civilization. It was by any measure the most organized urban society on the planet, and then it stopped. Not slowly, not gradually, it stopped. Near the center of the city, in a zone roughly 50 meters wide, the street-level pavement has fused into black glass. The clay and brick have been converted to a molten mass and resolidified. The temperature required to do that is somewhere between 1,400 and 1,500 Kelvins. For comparison, a house fire reaches around 800 better. The burning of ancient Troy, according to experimental archaeology, produced around 1,000 Kelvins. Whatever struck the center of Mohenjo-Daro burned hotter than any known ancient fire event at a single point in the middle of a city that had no volcano, no recorded military siege, and no historical enemy capable of concentrating that kind of energy. John Marshall of the Archaeological Survey of India led the excavations beginning in 1920. His teams found 44 human skeletons in the streets of the final destruction layer, not in buildings, not in defensive positions, but in the streets, in natural positions, lying where they fell. Some appeared to be holding hands. There were no weapons among them, no arrowheads, no signs of hand-to-hand combat. The bodies showed no evidence of plague, no signs of slow death. They looked, as one early report noted, like people who simply stopped moving. The Italian physicist David Davenport and nuclear physicist Ettore Vincenti published a technical analysis of the site in their 1979 study, arguing that the destruction pattern matched a point source thermal event. Their analysis described a gradient, complete vitrification at the center of the zone, partial fusion at around 100 mm out, and standard fire damage at around 200 mm. That is not the pattern of a city burning. That is the pattern of a single impact radiating outward from a fixed point. It is the pattern of Hiroshima. It is the pattern of Tunguska. It is the pattern of something arriving from above. The Davenport and Vincenti claim about elevated radioactivity at the site has circulated widely, but it should be noted that the original sourcing for those measurements is contested and not fully verified in peer-reviewed literature. What is not contested is the vitrification itself. The black glass in the street pavement is there. Marshall's team documented it. The heat gradient is there. The skeletal distribution is there. These are findings in official excavation records. In the mainstream explanation, environmental degradation in the drying of the Sarasvati river system, leading to gradual abandonment, does not touch any of them. Rivers drying up do not vitrify pavement. There is one more layer to this. The Rig Veda, composed around 1500 BCE, contains descriptions of a god named Indra destroying 90 fortress cities with a weapon called the Vajra. The text describes it as bright as the sun, capable of reducing entire cities to ash in a moment, arriving from the sky. Scholars classify this as mythology. Maybe it is. But the mythology of a civilization tends to remember in symbolic form the things that actually happened to it. What happened to the most advanced city in the ancient world at the precise moment it ceased to exist? Nobody knows. The Indus script has never been deciphered. The people who could have told us what they saw left no readable account. Only the glass in the street remains, silent and permanent, recording a temperature that nothing in their world should have been able to produce. Top 3, Nan Madol. From a city erased in a moment, we cross the Pacific to a place that was built across an entire ocean, stone by stone, column by column, on a remote island that should have made the whole project impossible. The mystery there is not in the destruction. It is in the construction and in what the columns did to each other at the points where they touched. Nan Madol. Imagine trying to explain this to someone who has never seen it. There is a city in the middle of the Pacific Ocean built on 92 artificial islands, connected by a network of canals, constructed from stacked basalt columns, each weighing between 5 and 50 tons. The nearest major landmass is thousands of kilometers away. The builders had no metal tools, no wheels, and no draft animals. The total mass of basalt moved to create Nan Madol on the island of Pohnpei in Micronesia is estimated at 750,000 metric tons, and at several structural junctions inside the city. The basalt columns have melted together, not crumbled, not cracked, but melted and fused at their contact points into a glassy interlock that requires temperatures above 1,000 degrees Celsius to produce. There is no volcanic activity in the region during the construction period. There is no kiln. There is no fire installation of any kind. Nan Madol was first documented by Western observers in the 1820s and formally surveyed by German archaeologist Paul Hambruch in 1910. Modern work, including LiDAR imaging and geophysical survey, conducted by archaeologist Rufino Mauricio in 2016, revealed the full extent of the structure, including submerged foundations that extend the site significantly beyond what is visible at the surface. Radiocarbon dating places the main construction between 1180 and 1200 CE, though carbon samples from deeper strata date the preparation of the site as far back as 200 BCE, suggesting a construction history stretching across more than 1,000 years. The fusion zones were documented by marine geologist Patrick Nunn of the University of the Sunshine Coast during fieldwork at the site. They are concentrated in the Nandawas precinct, the mortuary complex at the heart of Nan Madol, the most sacred and structurally critical section of the entire city. The contact surfaces between columns at load-bearing junctions show a glassy crystalline structure inconsistent with weathering. Basalt oxidizes over time. It stains orange and brown, and it flakes. It does not develop smooth, glassy interlock surfaces through exposure to tropical air and water. The fusion zones are not weathering products, they are heat products. The UNESCO World Heritage inscription for Nan Madol, awarded in 2016, includes a remarkable line buried in the official documentation. It states that the means by which the massive basalt columns were transported remains unknown. That sentence is sitting inside a United Nations heritage document about a city that has been studied for over a century. The academic establishment is not hiding the mystery. It simply has no answer. The Pohnpeian oral tradition offers one. It states that the city was built by twin sorcerers named Olasopa and Olasipa, who used flying magic to lift the stones into place. Every culture that cannot explain how something was built generates a story about supernatural construction. It is tempting to dismiss this as myth, but myths tend to encode memory. When a culture says the stones flew, what they may mean is that the stones moved in a way that contradicted everything they understood about how things move. The 2016 survey also detected a localized geomagnetic anomaly beneath the foundations of Nan Madol, a disturbance in Earth's magnetic field suggesting a large metallic mass buried somewhere below the structure. That anomaly has not been excavated or explained. Its existence is noted in the survey data and has generated almost no discussion in mainstream archaeology. The conventional explanation for the basalt transport involves floating the columns on bamboo rafts at high tide using the natural buoyancy of hollow basalt logs. It is an elegant theory. The heaviest experimental tests of the raft concept, however, have moved columns of under 5 tons. The heaviest columns at Nan Madol weigh 50. That is not a difference of degree, it is a difference of category. What fused the columns at their joints is a question that the raft theory does not even attempt to answer. Top 4, Pumapunku. From the Pacific, we travel inland to the roof of South America, to a plateau so high the air is thin and the stars at night feel close enough to damage you. Here, the mystery is not in a joint between columns. It is in the surface of the stone itself, a surface that looks like it was poured. Stand at 4,000 hours above sea level on the Bolivian Altiplano and look at the H-shaped blocks scattered across the plain at Pumapunku. And try to hold 2 facts in your mind at the same time. The first, these blocks are made of andesite, one of the hardest stones on Earth, and they have been shaped to tolerances of less than a millimeter, with internal channel systems and interlocking geometries that require either advanced machining or a process we cannot identify. The second, on the surface of several of these blocks, the stone has flow ridges, Subtle undulations in the material that do not come from a chisel or an abrasive. They come from a liquid. The stone was at some point liquid. Andesite melts at approximately 1,200 degrees. The nearest active volcanic field is 800 kilometers away. The altitude makes sustained high-temperature combustion extraordinarily difficult, even with modern equipment. The Tiwanaku complex, of which Puma Punku forms the ritual heart, was first described by Spanish conquistador Pedro Chiesa de Leon in 1549. He reported the ruins already ancient, with the local people having no memory of their construction. Modern archaeological excavation began with Wendell Bennett in the 1930s. The question of vitrified surfaces was raised by researcher Brian Forster beginning in 2012, supported by chemical analysis submitted to the Geological Society of Peru that reportedly confirmed a glassy surface layer on selected samples with a composition inconsistent with natural weathering products. Carbon dating by archaeologist Alexei Vranich of the University of Pennsylvania places the main occupation of the Tiwanaku complex between roughly 500 and 950 CE, though the construction sequence remains genuinely contested. The heaviest stones at Puma Punku, two red sandstone blocks weighing approximately 130 tons, were transported from the Copacabana Peninsula Quarry around 90 kilometers away across terrain that includes Lake Titicaca. The logistics of that transport without the wheel and without iron tools have never been satisfactorily demonstrated at full scale. The flow ridges are the detail that mainstream Andean archaeology tends not to address directly. The official position, represented by scholars including John Janicek of Vanderbilt University, is that the surface anomalies are products of differential weathering, the result of iron-rich minerals in the andesite reacting to 1,500 years of altiplano ultraviolet exposure and freeze-thaw cycles. That explanation works for pitting, for oxidation staining, and for flaking. It does not produce flow ridges. Flow ridges are morphological signatures of one specific thing: rapid solidification from a molten state. You see them on cooled lava. You see them on cast metal. You see them when something that was liquid becomes solid in a hurry. Differential weathering does not generate them. The altitude adds a layer of difficulty that is rarely discussed. At $4,000 an m, oxygen partial pressure is roughly 60% of sea level. Sustaining any high-temperature fire at altitude is genuinely harder than doing so at sea level. Sustaining temperatures of 1,200 degrees Celsius at that altitude with ancient fuel sources and with no evidence of any kiln or smelting infrastructure anywhere at the site approaches the physically implausible. The Tiwanaku oral tradition, recorded by Spanish chronicler Pedro Sarmiento de Gamboa in 1572, describes the site as a place where the stones were carried through the air to the sound of a trumpet. That same acoustic levitation motif appears at megalithic sites on multiple continents. It is almost certainly not a literal description of trumpet-assisted levitation, but it may be a garbled memory of a technology that produced intense sound, vibration, or energy as a byproduct of construction. Or it may preserve a memory of something arriving from the sky that made the rock workable for a window of time. If the andesite at Puma Punku was briefly molten and the carving was done while it was still in a plastic state, then everything we think we know about who built this place and how needs to be reconsidered. The blocks were not carved from hard stone. They were worked from soft stone. Something softened them, and then it left. Top 5. The Longyou Caves. The high altiplano is behind us. From South America's plateau, we cross the Pacific once more, north to the eastern coast of China, and descend below the surface of the Earth entirely into a system of chambers so geometrically perfect and so completely empty that they should not exist. The Longyou Caves. In June of 1992, a farmer named Wu Anai in Zhejiang Province, eastern China, decided to drain a pond that had sat on the edge of his village for as long as anyone could remember. He rented 17 pumps. It took 17 days. When the water was gone, he was standing at the entrance to an artificial cavern the size of an aircraft hangar. The walls were covered in a precise cross-hatch pattern, executed at a consistent 60-degree angle, running across every surface without interruption. And the walls themselves were hard, Not just stone hard, but ceramic hard, transformed by heat into a dense crystalline surface. There was no ash inside the cavern, no soot, no charcoal, and no sign that any fire had ever burned inside it. The heat that changed the walls had come from somewhere else. Draining the adjacent ponds revealed 24 caverns in total, covering more than 30,000 square meters of excavated space. The Chinese Academy of Sciences sent teams. Independent researchers followed. What they found refused to fit any existing category. The total volume of rock removed to create the 24 caverns amounts to approximately 1 million cubic meters of siltstone. Not a single fragment of that excavated material has been found anywhere in the surrounding landscape. 1 million cubic meters of rock was removed from the ground and simply does not appear to exist anywhere above it. The crosshatch pattern is not merely decorative. Every wall, every ceiling, and every floor in every one of the 24 caverns carries the same pattern at the same 60-degree angle, at the same consistent spacing. Researchers from the Chinese Academy of Sciences initially suspected modern machine tooling, so precise and uniform is the execution, before tool mark analysis confirmed the work was done by hand. The uniformity across 24 separate chambers is itself extraordinary. It suggests not individual craftsmen working independently, but a single system, a single process applied identically across an enormous underground complex. Analysis of the cave surfaces confirmed a hardened layer averaging 2 to 3 millimeters in depth, with a crystalline structure consistent with thermal treatment at approximately 600 to 800 Kelvin. That is the temperature of a pottery kiln. The walls have been fired. The problem is that firing a surface from outside requires either direct flame contact, which would leave soot, or a form of radiant or conducted heat that passes through the surrounding rock and affects the inner surfaces while leaving the outer rock entirely undamaged. That second option has no conventional explanation. It describes a process that transfers heat selectively through solid stone to a specific surface without combustion evidence. Several caverns share walls only millimeters thick. To excavate from inside without breaching those shared walls, the builders would have required precise knowledge of the adjacent cavern's position at every moment of excavation. That is a three-dimensional survey problem. Solving it with hand tools and solid rock in the dark without any form of acoustic or electromagnetic imaging technology requires an explanation that mainstream archaeology has not yet supplied. The dating problem is equally stubborn. No organic material has been found inside the caves for radiocarbon analysis. Stylistic comparisons have tentatively suggested a Pretian dynasty origin, potentially over 2,200 years old. But if a Pretian state or dynasty commissioned the excavation of a 30,000 square meter underground complex, the event would have been a matter of significant administrative record. China kept meticulous dynastic histories. No text from any period mentions the Longyu Caves, not a single line. The largest known underground complex in ancient China appears to have been built in complete historical silence. Where is the rock? Who built this? And what fired the walls from outside without leaving a trace inside? Those three questions have been sitting open since 1992. Nobody has answered any of them. Top 6. Chogha Zambil. From underground China, we travel west and north across Central Asia to the ancient heartland of Elam, to a ziggurat that survived invasion, survived millennia, and preserved inside its core the thermal record of an event that the invaders did not and could not have caused. Chogha Zanbil. From the outside, Chogha Zanbil still impresses. The ziggurat rises in 5 tiers of baked brick across the Khuzestan plain in southwestern Iran. Dedicated to the Elamite god in Shushinak by King Untash Naparisha around 1250 BCE, it is the best preserved ancient ziggurat outside Mesopotamia, and thousands of its original inscribed bricks remain intact on the exterior. Their cuneiform texts are still legible after more than 3,000 years. French archaeologist Roman Gershman excavated the site between 1951 and 1962 in one of the most meticulous ziggurat excavations ever conducted. What he found inside the structure is one of the strangest heat signatures in the archaeological record. The inner core of Chogha Zanbil has been calcined. Calcination is the conversion of calcium carbonate, the primary component of brick and lime-based construction material, into calcium oxide through sustained heat. It is not discoloration. It is not surface scarring. It is a chemical transformation that requires temperatures above 840 degrees maintained for an extended period. The exterior cladding of the ziggurat, the inscribed bricks that visitors can still read today, did not reach that temperature. They are intact, structurally sound, and readable. The interior core, sealed behind those intact exterior walls, was converted to powder. This is the thermal inversion, maximum heat at the center, diminishing toward the exterior. It is the exact opposite of every known fire damage pattern in the archaeological record. When a building burns, it burns from the outside in or from the inside out through a known ignition point. Neither of those patterns produces what Gershman documented at Chogha-Zambil, a structure where the outside is fine and the inside has been cooked past 840 degrees does not exist in the fire investigation literature. It should not exist in the archaeological record, but it does. Gershman's excavation report documents the calcined interior across all 5 tiers. UNESCO's technical assessments of the site, conducted during restoration planning, confirmed the calcination and noted the engineering challenge it created. The interior fill material had lost all structural integrity because it had been converted to lime. The outer shell was essentially holding a powder core. The standard attribution for this destruction is the Assyrian campaign of 640 BCE, when Ashurbanipal sacked Susa and documented in his own annals the burning and razing of Elamite temples. His annals describe external burning, demolition, and looting. But external burning does not calcine an interior. It leaves the interior cool relative to the exterior surface, which absorbs and dissipates the heat. For the interior of Chogha-Zambil to have reached calcination temperatures, while the exterior brick survived intact, the energy source had to be inside the structure or beneath it. The underground component of the site makes this stranger. Chogha-Zambil contains a series of underground passages and sealed chambers running beneath the main platform, some of which Gershman documented as showing even more intense calcination than the upper tiers. These passages are sealed from the surface. They have no openings through which an external fire could have been channeled. They are the most calcined sections of the site and the most protected from any external heat source. Whatever burned hottest at Chogha-Zambil burned in the places that should have been the safest. What was inside the ziggurat? What was inside those sealed underground chambers, protected from invasion, protected from weather, protected from time, that generated enough heat to convert brick to powder from the inside out while leaving the exterior inscribed with the king's name still readable today? Gershman did not ask that question in print. The UNESCO reports do not ask it either. It sits in the data unanswered, like a temperature reading from a furnace no one has found. Top 7. The Temple of Hathor, Dendera. From Iran's ancient plain, we move south and west across the Arabian Peninsula and the Red Sea to Egypt. Not to the pyramids, but to a temple whose sealed underground crypts hold a heat signature that follows the outlines of the carvings on the walls. As if the stone itself became a conductor, the Temple of Hathor, Dendera. The upper temple at Dendera is one of the best preserved in Egypt. The Ptolemaic and Roman-era construction, completed across the 1st century BCE and 1st century CE, covers a site of continuous sacred use that stretches back to the Old Kingdom around 2600 BCE. The astronomical ceiling is extraordinary. The famous Dendera zodiac, now in the Louvre, encodes stellar positions calculated by CNRS astronomer Sylvie Caville to approximately 50 BCE with a precision that indicates serious observational astronomy. Tourists visit the upper halls. They photograph the ceiling. Almost none of them ever reach the lower crypts. There are 3 levels of crypts below the main floor of the Dendera temple, accessible through hidden doorways concealed in the lower walls. The chambers are narrow, around 1 petameter wide, and in some passages up to 35 members long. They are sealed from the outside world. No windows, no ventilation shafts, and no evidence based on soot analysis of the walls of sustained lamp or torch use. In terms of archaeology, they are among the best preserved interior spaces in any Egyptian temple. And in specific sections of those sealed, dark, undisturbed chambers, the limestone walls have been partially decarbonated. Decarbonation is the conversion of calcium carbonate to calcium oxide through heat. It is the same process as calcination. It requires sustained temperatures above 840 degrees. It is not a staining. It is not a weathering product. It is a chemical change driven by energy. And it is happening in rooms that have been sealed for 2,000 years, that show no fire residue of any kind, and that no torch could have heated to 840 degrees without filling with lethal smoke and leaving every surface blackened. The affected zones are not uniform. They follow the outlines of the carved reliefs on the walls. The geometry of the carvings correlates with the geometry of the decarbonation. The plain limestone between carvings is comparatively unaffected. The stone along the carved lines has been transformed. If that collocation is real and not an artifact of differential limestone composition, it suggests that whatever energy affected these walls was channeled or concentrated by the geometry of the carvings themselves, as if the reliefs were functioning as a circuit diagram rather than as decoration. The carved images in the lower crypts of Dendera are among the most debated in Egyptology. Several of the reliefs show figures inside what appear to be elongated pods or bulbs with serpents running along internal columns, connected to what some engineers have interpreted as depicting a functional electrical or plasma device. Egyptologists, led by scholars including John Coleman Darnell of Yale, consistently interpret these as lotus flowers, djed pillars, and serpents, standard religious iconography rendered in the Ptolemaic style. That interpretation is the mainstream position, and it should be taken seriously. The iconography does fit within established Egyptian religious symbolism, but the decarbonation does not fit within established Egyptian religion or any religion. You cannot pray a wall to 840 in a sealed, unventilated chamber. You cannot wish it there with incense and ritual. Something produced that temperature in those rooms. The conventional explanation, groundwater mineral infiltration over 2 millennia, produces calcium carbonate deposition, not removal. The chemistry of decarbonation runs in the opposite direction from the chemistry of water infiltration. These are not the same process described in different terms. They are thermodynamically opposite processes. What was housed in the lower crypts of the Temple of Hathor? What operated in sealed chambers built from a denser, more heat-resistant limestone than the upper temple at temperatures no ancient lamp could produce, leaving a heat signature that follows the lines of the carvings like current follows a wire? The temple does not say. The walls recorded the event and kept the secret. Top 8. Göbekli Tepe. From the sealed crypts of Egypt, we travel northeast to the oldest temple on earth. Not in terms of what was built there, but in terms of what was done to it. Because the people who built it did not just walk away, they burned it and then they buried it. And the burn pattern on the stone tells a story that the burial was supposed to prevent anyone from ever reading Göbekli Tepe. The date is 9600 BCE. You are in southeastern Turkey on a hilltop in the Taurus foothills, and around you stand T-shaped limestone pillars, the tallest over 512 meters high and weighing up to 10 tons. They are not blank. They are covered in carvings: foxes, vultures, scorpions, snakes, wild boar, and human-like arms running down the sides of the T with a carved belt and hands meeting at the front. These pillars are portraits. They are portraits of something that stood upright, wore a belt, and had hands. You are a hunter-gatherer. According to every textbook written about your era, you should be focused entirely on survival. Instead, you and your contemporaries have been quarrying and erecting these megaliths for over 1,000 years. Then around 8000 BCE, you fill the entire complex with thousands of tons of rubble and walk away. Before you do, you burn it. Klaus Schmidt of the German Archaeological Institute identified Göbekli Tepe in 1994 and excavated it until his death in 2014. His work established it as the oldest known monumental architecture on Earth, predating Stonehenge by 6,000 years and the Egyptian pyramids by 7,000. The deliberate burial was confirmed stratigraphically. The fill material was deposited intentionally, not accumulated through natural erosion. The burning evidence was documented in Schmidt's field reports and subsequently analyzed in detail by archaeologist Lee Clare of the German Archaeological Institute in published research examining the destruction and burial sequence at the site. The calcination of the pillar tops is the anomaly. The upper sections of the T-shaped pillars, the heads, have been converted to lime through sustained temperatures above 800 degrees. The bases are comparatively unaffected. The heat was concentrated at the tops. That is not the pattern of a ground-level fire burning through debris. A ground-level fire in an enclosed space heats all surfaces relatively equally, rising through convection to produce maximum heat at ceiling level. A ground-level fire in an open-air complex with no roof produces maximum heat at fuel level, which is the ground, not 3 to 5 min-hours in the air at the apex of a carved stone pillar. The directional calcination, greatest at the top and diminishing toward the base, describes heat arriving from above. Pillar 43 at Göbekli Tepe, known as the Vulture Stone, is the most elaborately carved panel at the site. Researcher Andrew Collins and astrophysicist Rodney Hale published an analysis in Mediterranean Archaeology and Archaeometry in 2017, arguing that the imagery on Pillar 43 encodes a specific configuration of the night sky circa 10,150 BCE, a date that corresponds to the proposed Younger Dryas impact event. The cosmic impact or airburst, now supported by evidence published in the Journal of Geology by Kennett and colleagues in 2014, confirms an extraterrestrial impact layer at 28 sites globally. The vulture carved on the pillar, in this interpretation, points directly at the position of the sun during the Younger Dryas event. The headless human carved below the vulture may represent mass death. The animal symbols surrounding them may encode the constellation positions that mark that moment in the sky. If the builders of Göbekli Tepe were tracking a catastrophic event in the heavens, and if they burned and buried their temple in anticipation of or response to a recurrence of that event, then the calcination of the pillar tops is not a mystery. It is a timestamp. Something came from above, hot enough to convert the tops of 10-ton stone pillars to lime. And the people who built the oldest temple on Earth responded by sealing their knowledge underground before the sky could take it. That interpretation is speculative. The deliberate burial is not. The calcination pattern is not. The descending heat gradient is not. What descended is the question that nobody in official archaeology is quite asking yet. Top 9. The Pyramid of the Sun, Teotihuacan. From the world's oldest buried temple, we cross the Atlantic one final time to the largest pyramid in the Americas, to a layer discovered inside it in 1906, quietly removed, sold, and never studied. A layer of material that has no decorative function, no structural function, and every property of technology. The Pyramid of the Sun, Teotihuacan. The Pyramid of the Sun is the third largest pyramid on Earth. 43 million cubic feet of fill, roughly 2 million tons of stone and rubble stacked into a monument 216 min-meters wide at its base and 63 min-meters tall. It sits at the heart of Teotihuacan in the Valley of Mexico, once a city of somewhere between 125,000 and 200,000 people. The largest urban center in the pre-Columbian Americas, larger at its peak in 450 CE than any city in contemporary Europe. We do not know what the people who built it called themselves. Their writing system has not been deciphered. Their ethnic origin is unknown. They left no royal tombs, no named rulers, and no dynastic record. They built one of the most geometrically precise cities in human history, and then declined around 750 CE for reasons that remain genuinely unclear. Inside their greatest monument in 1906, the excavating archaeologist Leopoldo Batres found a continuous layer of mica approximately 5 centimeters thick, sandwiched between two construction phases of the pyramid. He removed it, he sold it. Its current location is unknown. Mica is not a local material. There are no natural mica deposits in central Mexico. The specific variety of mica found at Teotihuacan has been petrologically matched to deposits in Minas Gerais, Brazil, a minimum of 3,000 km to the southeast. Transporting mica sheets from Brazil to central Mexico across jungle, river systems, and mountain ranges without the wheel and without metal tools required extraordinary motivation and extraordinary organization. That alone is remarkable. But the physical properties of mica are what make this strange. Mica is a thermal and electrical insulator. It is transparent to certain radiation wavelengths. It is a natural capacitor in layered sheets. It does not burn. It does not react chemically with surrounding materials. It is used today in nuclear reactor shielding, in particle physics instruments, and in high-temperature electrical insulation. These are the properties of a functional material, of something placed where it is because of what it does, not what it looks like. The mica layer inside the pyramid of the sun was not visible to anyone once the pyramid was complete. It was buried under millions of tons of fill. It could not have been placed there as decoration or prestige display. You do not import a material across 3,000 nautical meters and hide it permanently underground to demonstrate wealth. You hide it there because it needs to be in that specific location to perform a specific function. The Mica Temple, a separate structure at Teotihuacan, excavated as part of the Teotihuacan mapping project in the 1980s, contains two intact mica layers totaling 90 square meters, confirming that the placement of mica was not a one-time anomaly, but a deliberate, repeated practice at the site. That context makes the removal and sale of the pyramid layer even more significant. The one in situ example inside the largest structure at the site, the one that might have revealed its exact position relative to the pyramid's internal geometry, was extracted and dispersed before anyone thought to ask what it was for. In 2015, archaeologist Sergio Gomez announced the discovery of liquid mercury pools beneath the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent at Teotihuacan, the first liquid mercury ever found at a Mesoamerican archaeological site. Mercury is electrically conductive. It reflects electromagnetic radiation. It has been proposed by researchers as a possible component of ancient technological systems in other contexts. Its presence at Teotihuacan, in an underground chamber beneath the city's most religiously significant pyramid, has no conventional explanation. The official position is that it may have represented a ritual body of water, symbolizing the underworld. That may be correct. It may also be that Teotihuacan was using conductive materials in its largest structures for reasons that our current categories are not equipped to identify. The Avenue of the Dead, Teotihuacan's main axis, is misaligned from true north by 15.102 degrees. That misalignment is not a surveying error. A civilization that built the Pyramid of the Sun to tolerances that still impress modern engineers did not misalign its main avenue by accident. That 15.12 degree offset points to the setting position of the Pleiades star cluster at Teotihuacan's latitude during the city's construction period. They built their entire city grid around a star cluster for reasons we have not determined. A layer of Brazilian mica hidden inside a pyramid, pools of mercury beneath a temple, and a city grid oriented to the Pleiades. These are not the details of a simple agricultural society building monuments for gods they feared. They are the details of a civilization that understood materials and geometry in ways that produce things we cannot replicate and cannot explain. Top 10. The Global Heat Signature. 10 sites, 5 continents, 12,000 years, and in every single case, the same impossible detail. The heat moved the wrong way. It went inward when it should have gone outward. It concentrated at the top when it should have risen from the ground. It penetrated sealed chambers that had no fire inside them. It vitrified stone at temperatures no ancient fuel source achieves, at altitudes where combustion barely works, on remote islands where no heat infrastructure existed, and in underground caves where no flame ever burned. The stone remembers every temperature it has ever reached. And the stone at these sites is telling us something that the official explanations cannot absorb. The mainstream position on most of these anomalies is not dishonest. Archaeologists and geologists bring serious expertise to serious evidence, and the consensus represents the best available interpretation of an incomplete record. Differential weathering is real. Ancient craftsmen were genuinely extraordinary. The destruction patterns at some sites can plausibly be attributed to warfare, fire, and the passage of time. None of that is wrong, but the mainstream explanations work at the level of the general and fail at the level of the specific. They account for the fact of damage without accounting for the direction of heat, the absence of combustion residue, the temperatures that exceed the maximum output of any ancient fuel, or the presence of technologically functional materials sealed inside monuments and never discussed again. Those are not details that better dating will resolve, or that more excavation will explain away. They are documented findings sitting in official reports, quietly generating the one question the reports decline to ask. What we may be looking at across all these sites is the physical evidence of a world that was more sophisticated than the one we inherited, that passed through catastrophes we don't yet fully understand, and that left its most advanced knowledge encoded in stone, because stone was the only medium that could survive long enough to be found. History taught as a straight line of progress, from primitive to complex, may be the wrong shape entirely. These sites suggest something closer to a cycle: peaks of knowledge, catastrophic interruption, slow reconstruction, and then the next civilization building its temples on ground it cannot explain, inheriting a technology it cannot name. Most people walk through these places and see ruins. They see tourism. They see the standard caption on the information board and move on. But you stayed. You followed the heat gradient into the sealed chamber and asked what was generating it. You looked at the flow ridges on the andesite and asked what melted them. You noticed the mica and asked why it was there. That instinct, the refusal to stop at the explanation that almost works, is exactly what these sites have been waiting for since the people who built them disappeared. Heat does not lie. Stone records every temperature it has ever reached, every force it has ever absorbed, every event that changed it at the molecular level. It does not forget, it does not revise. It does not accept the explanation that is easier to believe. The walls at these sites were changed by something real, something physical, something that left a signature in the material itself. We have named the signature, we have measured it, we have confirmed it in laboratories. What we have not done is explain it. That task belongs to the people who keep asking the question. If these stories of melted stone and forgotten science have changed the way you look at the ancient world, please subscribe and like this channel. We are digging up the history that they tried to bury under layers of myth and time. Let's uncover the truth together. The next piece of the puzzle is coming soon.